Hi everyone, sorry I'm late.
Don't worry, Hannah. We've only just started. We thought we should go over the theories we've studied so far, so we're ready for the seminar discussion on Thursday afternoon.
Of course, you're right. I don't think I can remember all the theories related to consumer energy consumption.
No, Hannah. That's the reading for Friday's lecture. Thursday's seminar discussion is about the current thinking on alternative energy.
Oh yes, sorry. I'm a bit disorganised at the moment.
Never mind. So, Mike, what do you think about the academics' point of view on nuclear energy?
Well, I think I have to agree with them on price being a factor for choosing nuclear in the long term.
Me too. It's definitely the most cost-effective measure. Don't you agree, Hannah?
To start with, I didn't, but the text Professor Edwards gave us persuaded me. The only thing that concerns me is that there have been some disasters in various parts of the world.
Yes, some texts warn of the dangers of nuclear power, using previous disasters as examples.
I know what you mean, but I suppose the risk is minimal these days. What do you think about wind and solar energy in terms of the price in relation to the advantages? For me, they're just not worth it. Both are expensive, and it's difficult to predict the amount of energy each one will produce.
You know, Mike, I'm afraid I don't share your opinion. This text here talks about the likelihood of improved technology increasing the amount of energy and reducing the costs in the future.
Yes, but that's not enough proof to be sure of the relationship between the costs and the benefits.
Exactly. The evidence seems incomplete to me.
Well, that's something we can follow up on with the rest of the group in the seminar on Thursday.
Welcome to this fire evacuation talk, everyone. I'm Melanie Brooks, the Fire Safety Manager here at Tech Base, and my office is on the 4th floor if you ever need to find me. Today, I want to run through the fire evacuation procedure now that we're in a new building. First of all, can I just remind you that if you hear the fire alarm, you should always head towards the main stairs in order to leave the building. Please assume that the alarm is real, except if it sounds at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. At this time, it's always a test, we hope. It's vital that you do not spend time collecting your bags or personal belongings because this wastes valuable evacuation time. When you have left the building, please look for the fire marshals who will be wearing fluorescent orange jackets. They'll show you where the waiting area is, but just so you know, it's the park at the rear of the office block. Your department has a fire safety officer, I believe it's Susan Jenkins, and it's her job to make sure that everyone who signed in has vacated the building. Susan will then tell the fire safety manager if there are any missing people. Can I also remind you that you mustn't enter the building again until the fire safety manager, in other words, me, tells you that the situation is no longer dangerous. The Duke of Edinburgh's Award is a programme of activities designed to help young people from all backgrounds develop personally. There are 3 levels: bronze, silver and gold, and for each level, participants have to complete a series of activities in 4 categories: volunteering, physical, skills and expedition. This talk will explain what you have to do in order to get a bronze award. The first thing you need to do is find a Duke of Edinburgh centre near you. This could be your school, college or youth club. Then you'll need to pay a small fee to enrol in the programme. Once you've enrolled, you'll get a welcome pack, which explains the 4 categories in more detail. Then you can start planning what to do. You can do many different types of activity for each category, but you must get them approved by your Duke of Edinburgh coordinator before you start, so you don't waste time doing something which is not approved. The other important person is your assessor. This is the person who will certify that you've completed each activity by signing your record book. After you've completed all the activities in the time given, your assessor will send your record book results to the operating authority, who will check it. If everything is satisfactory, you'll get your certificate and badge to confirm you've completed the award, and after that, you can start working on the silver award.
OK, well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Simon Springer from City Tours. I see that we've generated quite a lot of interest. If everyone could just find a seat, I'll get started. Now, some of you might have read our brochure, in which case you won't need me. Well, no, joking aside, what I'd like to do first is to tell you a bit about us. We are an SU-approved student tour operator, which mainly covers the local area during the week and further afield at the weekend. Our service is reliable and our prices are competitive. We provide a wide range of tours both in the UK and on the continent, but I won't be talking about the European tours today. Instead, we'll be looking at excursions closer to home. One of the most popular with the Art and Design department is the Cranfield Art Gallery. The building itself is a stunning piece of modern 21st century architecture designed by the great architect George Lloyd, and it's set in 5 acres of parkland 2 miles outside the city centre. Its huge windows allow in more natural light than you would normally find in a gallery. At the same time, the structure itself cleverly shields the works of art from the damaging effects of direct sunlight. So, what can you see when you're inside? On display, there are a number of paintings from well-known artists, both local and international. If you are an art lover, you will almost certainly recognize some of the names. It boasts the celebrated Lady in the Rain, painted by the acclaimed 19th century Scottish artist George McAdams. Just a minute. There seems to be a type error in the brochure. It should read M-A-C, separate word, Adams, A-D-D-A-M-S. Sorry about that, folks. I'm sure that's the only one. There are not only portraits, but seascapes in miniature and landscapes of the local countryside, and a whole gallery devoted to modernism and abstract art. Yes?
Good afternoon, everyone. In the last few weeks, we have been looking in depth at the ancient civilizations of South and Central America and the growing sophistication of their culture. Just to briefly recap on the last lecture, we studied 2 of the most influential ancient civilizations, the Olmecs, found in western Mexico, and the Chavin, which were situated along the coast of northern Peru, both of which existed from around 1200 to 300 BC. There is some evidence that points to their existence long before this date. However, this was at the very infancy of their development, and, therefore, there is very little to go on. It is safe to say, though, that during this earlier period, both civilizations ceased their nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyles, settled in permanent villages, and began fishing and farming the land. This long-term stability laid the foundations for the rapid and sustained growth of their civilization. More crucially, we should also take into account that there is evidence of a system of writing and religious worship, both of which indicate a highly developed culture. It is with this in mind that we turn to one of the more well-documented ancient civilizations of South America, the Aztecs. In this introduction, I will initially provide you with a thumbnail sketch of their most outstanding achievements before going into further detail later in this lecture. Their demise was much more recent than the Olmecs and the Chavin, as they settled in the Valley of Mexico around the 12th century and continued to extend their empire until the early 16th century. Known to be ruthless and ambitious, the Aztecs came to dominate the surrounding tribes, employing a relentless military campaign carried out over many generations. At their zenith, the Aztecs ruled over 10 million people and became extremely wealthy and powerful. One source of this wealth derived from trading crops such as corn, beans, and tomatoes throughout the empire. Their pioneering methods of agricultural irrigation were innovative and highly effective. We shall be analyzing them and their implications as a matter of course. Another way of generating revenue was from the taxation of the conquered tribes who lived locally and feared and revered them. Like the Olmecs and the Chavin, they too had gods, the main one being the sun god, Tonatiuh, to whom many human sacrifices were made, often prisoners taken from neighboring tribes and with a considerable amount of ritual. This is a fascinating but complex area, so we will not have time to look at it here today, but it will be covered in depth in Friday's session. Finally, it is imperative that you keep an open mind and remember that these people did not live in a modern law-abiding society such as our own, but one which was fraught with peril and steeped in tradition. Should we only consider the bloodshed and minimize the significance of cultural development, there is the danger of perceiving these people merely as cruel savages. This would be an unfair assumption, to say the least. You must not forget that these people were not only literate and numerate, but they were also highly skilled musicians, sculptors, poets, and engineers, and it is at this area that we will be looking today. Welcome to Global Space Center. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed the tour we laid on for you this morning, and the lunch, of course. Let me just introduce myself before we go any further. I'm Linda Page, and I'm lucky enough to lead the research team here at the center. Today, I will be giving the first of 3 talks on some of the most recent developments in space technology. I'm sure everybody's taken a look at their programs and is familiar with the itinerary. But I'd like to remind you that each talk is an hour long with a 15-minute break and refreshments are available. You will have noticed, if you looked at your pamphlets, that all 3 talks follow a general theme. The question we're asking ourselves today is, are we alone? Is there life on other planets? And, if so, what are the implications for us, the human race? In my talk, we'll be looking nearer to home, at the planet Mars. Anyone who is familiar with the red planet will instantly know that Mars is the 4th from the Sun and is a dusty, barren, inhospitable world with an extremely thin atmosphere, and that it is incapable of supporting life, at least life as we know it. But there is evidence to the contrary when you start to examine the topography. During our research, we have come across water erosion features which suggest that there were once rivers and shallow seas, a legacy of a planet which may have supported life at some point in time. It is now that we come to the crux of the matter. As humans, and perhaps more importantly, neighbors of this planet, surely it is our responsibility to find out what has happened to it. If there was life and it was obliterated, could the self-same thing happen to us? Are we next? With this in mind, we have been sending expeditions to Mars for more than 30 years. Data is gathered both from space and the planet itself by a piece of equipment called a rover. True to its name, the rover is programmed to move over the surface, taking samples and feeding back information to base. Until now, these rovers have only been able to do this with varying degrees of success, as the Martian dust storms and extreme climate takes a toll on the vehicles. And up to now, the amount of equipment that rovers have been able to carry has been limited. Before turning to the future, it is only right that we should examine the history of the Mars expeditions, of which there have been 4 to date, with varying degrees of success. The first 2 rovers were sent by the Russians in the days of the International Space Race. These were called Mars 2 and 3 and were set to land in 1971. Unfortunately for the Russians, Mars 2 crashed on impact, and Mars 3 failed to operate more or less as soon as it landed. Despite the rocky beginning by the Soviets, this setback did not deter the Americans from going ahead with a series of missions to Mars, beginning with the Viking program, in which 2 space probes were launched in 1975. Both Viking Landers 1 and 2 landed successfully in 1976. The lander's dimensions were a mere 1.09 by 0.56 meters, and therefore could only carry a small amount of equipment with which to carry out biological testing. Dimensionally speaking, not particularly impressive, you may think, but remember, Viking 2 continued to operate on the surface for 1,281 days and served to provide the foundations for the knowledge compiled on the NASA Mars database right up to the beginning of the 21st century. As you can imagine, this was a great achievement for the time and provided the springboard for future missions. This success was followed by the 1997 launch of the Mars Pathfinder, which transported the Sojourner rover to the Red Planet. Compared with the previous mission, this was only moderately successful, operating for just under 2 months before malfunctioning. This was also a small, lightweight robotic rover at 10.6 kilograms. But by this time, the equipment had advanced significantly with an onboard computer used for on-site data analysis. Last but not least, the Opportunity, which was launched in 2004 and was still operational in October 2011, surpassing the longevity of all other rovers up to date.
Hello, I'm Bob Wilson, and I'm here to talk to you about the possibility of there being other inhabitable worlds. It may seem strange, but ever since I was a child, I have looked up at the skies and wondered whether there are other people on other planets doing exactly the same thing as me. Perhaps we are a mere pinpoint of light in the skies amongst millions of others. The question is, where do we start looking? The time-honored expression, a needle in a haystack, comes to mind. But there are certain criteria which may help us to narrow down the odds. I will start by examining the location of possible life-bearing planets. One thing the universe is not short of is planets, fascinating in their wide diversity and because of their sheer number. Surely there must be more planets out there like our own. Naturally, there are limitations, the first one being the type of star which they orbit, some of which are far too hot or cold to support life. So the correct temperature is a crucial factor. This, of course, rules out the majority of stars in the cosmos. Let's take, for example, a fairly typical solar system with a smallish yellow sun which resembles our own. Orbiting it, there are 7 planets, some of which are rocky and others gaseous. 2 of these are located in the habitable zone. The others are either searingly close to the sun or occupy the frozen edges of the system. Either way, it is highly unlikely that any of these would be able to support intelligent life. So what about the others in the habitable zone? The likelihood of them being inhabited is still slim. Both Venus and Mars occupy this area, and yet neither of them have conditions conducive for life. So what makes us special? What separates our planet from the others? According to modern theorists, the key ingredients for life are water and greenhouse gases. These gases trap enough heat to warm the planet sufficiently to keep the seas liquid and our planet at a comfortable temperature. I'm sure a lot of our environmentalist friends would throw up their arms in horror, but there is a simple logic behind this theory. Carbon dioxide is the primary greenhouse gas in our atmosphere, and this was so even before the Industrial Revolution.